The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television. Major funding for your legislators is provided by Move Minnesota, a statewide coalition fighting for a 10-year commitment to fixing our dire transportation needs. A safe, reliable transportation system strengthens Minnesota's economy. Join the conversation at movemn.org. Additional funding provided by Flaherty and Hood has provided quality legal and legislative services to clients in Greater Minnesota for more than 20 years. Our legal team focuses on municipal employment and environmental law, while our lobbyists energetically represent clients at the state capitol. Online at flaherty-hood.com. MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to the 35th session of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting the citizens of Minnesota. Now, here is your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to this week's version of Your Legislators. This week we don't have any legislators because they're off for the week. This is the Easter Passover recess and the legislators have gone home to be with their families, but we do have a program for you this evening, and it's a program that promises to be very interesting. We hope that you'll stay with us throughout the full hour as we discuss matters of budget and finance. And you're saying to yourself, how can that possibly be interesting? But we want you to hang with us because I think you're going to enjoy the next hour. Our guest this week is Myron Franz, who is the director of what we would call the Minnesota equivalent of the Office of Budget. It's the OMB equivalent here in Minnesota. And he's going to talk a little bit about some of the work that the Minnesota Budget Office does and some of the work that maybe it'll be doing in the future. Let's begin this evening's program, though, as we do any week, and that's giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our viewers. Mr. Franz, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and so forth.
Well, thank you for letting me be on tonight. It's a pleasure to be here, especially after your recent celebration of 25 years on this show.
They keep looking for somebody who can do this job, and until they find that person, I'm going to be here.
Well, I think they've got it right. You've done a great job. And I do tell my friends who haven't seen the show to watch, because I love the discussions that you have here where you get the four legislators around and they have a great discussion, low-key discussion, and it's kind of out of the normal realm of in the media, so it's a great learning experience. So I'm pleased to be a part of this. Thank you.
I appreciate those comments. I double your appearance fee, but since it's zero, it won't help you any.
Well,
so tell our viewers.
I tried.
Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, Mr. Franz.
Well, I just got off a stint of doing 4 years as Revenue Commissioner for Governor Dayton, and he asked me this last December if I would move over and take over at Minnesota Management and Budget and take the helm there. So I was in private practice law for about 27 years, ran a small company, a microscope company, for a couple of years, and then the governor asked me to be revenue commissioner starting in 2011. So I've had a wonderful opportunity to work in the private sector, both as a lawyer and in a business capacity, and then to come into government and operate the revenue department and now the MMB. And it's been a great experience for me, because at this level, there's so much that's going on in state government in terms of both on the revenue side from the last 4 years, but on the MMB side, because MMB is the chief HR function, the human resources function. It's the chief accounting function. It's the chief budget function. It's the chief budget function, and it's also the chief accounting function. So there are so many aspects of state government run through and are supervised by MMB. So it's a wonderful opportunity for me to be involved and give advice to the governor about ways to improve our budgeting and HR. So I'm enjoying it. It's been a great 4 years. I'm looking forward to another 3.5 or whatever 4 years left with the governor at MMB.
Where's home originally? Where are you from?
Home is originally in Kansas, and just north of Wichita, Marion, Kansas, a small town of a couple thousand. In fact,
Wichita State or the University of Kansas? Who were you rooting for?
Well, actually, I went.
They're both gone, but who were you rooting for before they were gone?
I have to confess, I was rooting for the University of Kansas. I went to the law school at the University of Kansas, But I grew up as a Wichita State basketball fan too, because that was back in the day when Wichita State was really quite good. So I had a little bit of torn emotion, but I knew that Kansas would not lose in that contest. Unfortunately, Wichita State not lost the next game, so my bracket was busted for the very beginning that day.
So you did your undergraduate work at Kansas, and then you went to law school there as well?
Yes.
And then came to Minnesota?
Well, actually, I did a stint in D.C. So after law school, I graduated and went to Miller & Chevalier, a tax firm in Washington, D.C. It's been a couple of years working in this tax law firm. It was a great experience because a lot of what was going on with that law firm was clients would come to D.C. to hire the tax lawyers in cases where the answer was not very obvious, and so we had to do a lot of legislative history research. So it was a really great opportunity for me to learn how to delve into congressional action, look at the committee reports, look at what was said on the floor, and really try to understand what was drafted in the legislation and what did Congress really mean by that. And a lot of people sort of laugh at that, but you really can dig in and pull back the layers and get an understanding for what the intent of a particular piece of legislation. So I had that 2 years there, and I moved to Minnesota in 1985, so this is my 30th year in Minnesota. I kid a lot of my friends, though, because they give me a little static about not being born in Minnesota. I said, yes, but I chose Minnesota. So I came here and chose Minnesota. I've been married a young woman, Minnesota woman. We have 2 Minnesota boys, so I feel very lucky to be here.
At 30 years, you're almost from here, but we'll deal with that issue
almost.
later. So let's jump right into this. And I want to remind our viewers that this is, as with our programs every week, this is an opportunity for you to address your question. You can send it to us electronically. The various means are described on your screen there, but we can take your questions via Twitter, Facebook, and also by facsimile and maybe smoke signals. But
you still getting facsimiles? Faxes?
I have them right here.
Oh, that's great. You don't see a lot of that anymore.
So anyway, let's jump right in, because actually MMB, surprising as it might seem, has found itself in the middle of a legislative, I don't think it rises to the level of controversy, but a legislative discussion, and that is the issue of whether or not the legislature should have its own budgeting service, its own legislative budget office, so to speak. So maybe we can start, Mr. Franz, by having you tell us what it is that MMB does and how this proposal comes up and what your view is on it.
So MMB prepares what we call fiscal notes. So when the legislature is considering legislation, they want to do an analysis of what will that cost. So, for example, if they want to add a law that requires the Department of Transportation to do something new or add to what they're already doing, they want to understand how much is that really going to cost. What is the overall cost of that program going to be? So when the legislature puts together a bill and introduces that bill, or even before, they can ask for a fiscal note. Now, those fiscal notes come to MMB, and then MMB figures out, well, which agencies can answer the factual question. So in the example I just described, they would ship that fiscal note request over to the Department of Transportation. They would do all the factual background to understand what does this new program involve, how much would it cost, and then it comes back to MMB, who reviews that fiscal note and then sends it over to the legislature for them to analyze. And there's a lot of discussion. I mean, people sometimes forget that it's not a set process. So because sometimes people write legislation and we come back with an answer that maybe it costs $250,000. They say, well, we didn't think it would cost that much. And we talk to them and we find out, well, actually, they didn't really intend the legislation to do what we think it does. And so we change, the legislation is changed, or we revise our assumptions. So it's all a matter of digging up the facts in the agency, reviewing that at MMB, and then providing that clarifying understanding of the fiscal note to the legislature. So that process goes on hundreds and hundreds of times throughout the legislature, as you can imagine. Now, there's no requirement that a bill have a fiscal note. And actually, we think in many cases that was one thing that the Office of Legislative Auditor suggested that we should do to improve the system going forward. But right now, there is no requirement. Now, on the other hand, there is a requirement that there be a revenue estimate for tax bills that are introduced. So the Revenue Department does those separately from fiscal notes. So this process goes on. It's been going on. Minnesota's been doing it this way for over about 41 years. And there's always a fiscal note or two every session, it seems, that gets people a little concerned because either the fiscal note cost much more than the author of the bill thought that it would, or that there was some description of the law that wasn't quite accurate. So these things get negotiated and get reviewed and discussed. But this year there is a proposal that instead of having MMB do the review and submitting the fiscal note, that there would be a new office created in the legislature, and the legislature would have its own office to prepare its fiscal notes for the proposed legislation. And that's kind of the debate right now, is where should that office be? Our position has been that we don't think the system is broken. We think it's working just fine. A lot of people talk about the fact that over 30 states have a situation where the budget office is in the legislature. And they say, well, we're kind of an outlier. I say, well, we're actually a leader. What happens is you need the rating agencies that look at Minnesota in terms of whether they should be rated AAA or AA. They look at how well does our government function. And they look at things like nonpartisan fiscal notes or nonpartisan forecast, budget forecast. There are some states that have dueling forecasts, for example, that the legislature may put out a forecast and the government may put out, or the executive may put out a forecast, but we have a nonpartisan forecast that everybody relies on. It's twice a year. And the budget office, we think, operates much the same way. There are ways we could improve it, but our position is it's working well. We have dedicated non-professionals. I never see a fiscal note until it's sent over to the legislature. I have no involvement in it. No one tells me that it's even going on. It's all done at the level of professional, nonpartisan staff who do a great job of getting these facts.
So I suppose we should at least put out on the table the fact that you are a partisan appointee by the governor, as was true in the Pawlenty administration and will be true to the successor of Governor Dayton. And does that in any way affect the budgeting, the fiscal note process?
It does not. And the Office of Legislative Auditor did a report in 2012, and he looked at this process, and he studied it, and he found there were, in the time period that he looked, both in the beginning of the Dayton administration and the prior administration, he found no instances where the political appointee in charge of that agency had any influence or slowed down or sped up or changed the cost estimate on these fiscal notes. So I think it's fairly well established that the nonpartisan staff, the professional staff, they do their job, they put it together the best that they can, and without any regard to political appointees. So we think it works well in that regard.
We have a question from a viewer who wants to know, how much money does it take to keep the state government running? And that's a really broad question, but it's a pretty good question. Maybe you could talk a little bit about budgets, cash flow, all those kinds of things, and tell our viewers kind of how that process works.
That's a great question, actually. You know, one of the things, in fact, that's one of the things I've had to learn a little bit more about. I think we'll give a little bit of a history lesson. You know, right now we have, each year, the general fund budget is a little over $20 billion a year. And that's just general fund. That doesn't include federal funds or federal highway funds. So our general fund, money primarily from state and local taxes, fund the government at about a little over $20 billion a year.
So the $40 billion figure we've been hearing from our legislators includes money from the federal government.
That's a 2-year. That's the 2-year cycle.
So 2-year cycle. Okay.
So yeah, in fact, that's what most, and that gets confusing. Most of the legislators always talk about the 2-year cycle, but people the lay people tend to talk about what's a yearly amount. So it's about $20 billion.
So $40 billion over 2 years.
$40 billion over 2 years. It's about $35 billion a year for all funds. So if you include all federal funds and trunk highway funds, then it's about $35 billion a year, or a little over $70 billion a year for 2 years. So right now, that's how much we spend each year. Now, it changes every year based on the number of people, the number of kids in school, the number of, how the economic activity goes, and what kind of resources we have to have for our police and fire to serve the people in our communities. But the budgeting process is really designed for the way we've been running it, is designed for every agency to step back and say every 2 years, what is it that you're doing? What is your core function with the Department of Transportation or Department of Corrections? What is your core function, and how much money do you need to do that? And do you need more or less money going forward? If you need more, why? And why can't you do less? I mean, Governor Dayton's really impressed upon, I think, all the commissioners that the public wants you to run your agency and perform the tasks you're supposed to perform, but do it in a way that is as efficient as possible. So we go through this cycle Every year we try to match revenues and expenses. Obviously, we have to have a balanced budget. So another part of the question really is, what does it take to keep the government operating? Well, every 2 years we come up with a biennial budget for the 2 years, and we have to have it balanced. Minnesota has a balanced budget requirement like most states. We can't borrow for our operating budget like the federal government can. We can borrow for capital projects, for bonding. So we have to, every 2 years, propose a budget where the revenues match the expenditures, and that's one of the ways we try to make sure that we live within our means.
Talk a little bit about cash flow, because the public may not understand that that's a function that MMB also manages.
Cash flow is really an interesting dynamic because, like anyone's checkbook, your money comes in sometimes at different times. We get a lot of money, and as you might not be surprised, during the
April 15th.
April 15th is a number that's coming up pretty quick, right? And a lot of money comes in the first 3 or 4 months of the year. But also a lot of money goes out the door because of refunds. So many people overpay their taxes throughout the year, and so they get refunds around April 15th. So we try to match the revenue that's coming in with the payments that we have going out, but it doesn't always match very well, as you might not be surprised. We have a lot of payments that go out the door for local government aid the first part of the year, and then in December there's a second big payment in December. So our cash flow goes up and down quite a bit, and it can vary. $100 million in a month, and we have to try to make sure that we have enough cash on hand. So we have a cash account that's about $350 million, and we have a reserve account on top of that, which is a little over $1 billion now. We have a total of $1.3 billion in cash and reserves that we can rely on to pay those bills throughout the month. Now we can't use that money except for items that have been appropriated by the legislature. So we're tied to making sure that we do that. But in the years past, a few years ago, we found that the cash flow was such that we didn't have enough cash on hand at times. We had to do short-term borrowing. We've now gotten into a situation where our cash flow is sufficient to meet the ebbs and flows that come in each month. And in addition, we now have over $1.3 billion in the reserve, which is the highest reserve we've ever had in this state.
The question of the reserve comes up over the course of my time with this program because of the progressive nature of Minnesota's taxation and the fact that it is very sensitive to swings in the economy, up and down. And so I think there's been some discussion that maybe as large as the reserve is, it may not be large enough. And I'm wondering, does MMB have a position on that, or is that something you leave to the legislature?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I do recommend to the governor and to the legislature that we increase the reserve. Typically, we have a budget target or reserve target. So right now, as I mentioned, we have $1.3 billion in total in what we call the rainy day fund, cash and reserve. But our economists believe that we should have about a little over $2 billion in that account, because they've got a target that says we should have 5.2% of the non-dedicated general revenues in a biennium, which we have about $40 billion of biennium non-dedicated revenues, times 5.2%, it's a little bit over $2 billion. So we would like to say, as an MMB commissioner, I would recommend to both the governor and to the legislature that we should continue to march toward that little over $2 billion number, because once again, the rating agencies that I mentioned, they'd love to see that figure between 4 and 5% of your revenues. Because if there's a downturn in the economy, that gives you that little bit of a cushion, kind of a shock absorber, before you start having to cut programs and whatever. So we're happy that it's gotten up a little bit higher. Now, we do have a new automatic reserve provision that was put in the law last year. So in 2013, the legislature added a new provision that the governor signed that says in November, we have 2 forecasts, November and February. And in November, if there's a positive balance for that forecast, meaning that there's more money we assume is coming in than what we're paying out, then 1/3 of that positive balance goes into the reserve account. This last year, in November, we had a little over $600 million in the forecast, and we put $183 million, or 1/3 of that, into the reserve account. So we have a mechanism to add to that every year if we have good forecasts coming forward.
One of the things that we've discussed here over the course of the last few weeks, and I think it might be wise to sort of remind viewers how this works. When we get a forecast that says, as the most recent forecast suggests, that there's going to be a surplus of somewhere north of $1.8 billion, that doesn't all come in the day after the forecast. Tell our viewers how that process works, and it might be useful to also talk about how accurate those forecasts have been over a fairly long period of time, to the extent you have that information.
This is such a critical function that we have with the economic forecast because it's so critical to us maintaining our balance in our budget. So it's been designed for many years to have the November forecast and then the February forecast. And one of the reasons you want the November forecast is you want to be able to, for the governor or whatever governor is, to be looking toward the next year and what kind of funds are we short, or do we have enough funds for the next year, so he can start planning for the next legislative session. And then the legislature comes in, usually in January, February, and then we have the February forecast, which occurs after the end of the calendar year, because there's a lot of economic activity at the end of the calendar year because of the tax year change. So the February forecast really helps.
Consumer spending, sales tax, Christmas,
the holiday season is
right.
Tremendous. And you have a lot of people paying taxes at the end of the year in anticipation of that year. So there's a lot of things happening in December and January that you want to take into account. So it's that February forecast that we just had that's what we use to finish the legislative session with. As you mentioned, we have $1.8 billion that's forecast. But let me tell you the difference between a forecast balance and a forecast surplus. So what our economist does, Dr. Laura Kolumbakidis, is what she does is she works with her team, and they analyze the IHS is a firm that we use to give us their global perspectives about what's going on in the world. So we look at this global perspective, international changes, and they also look at the revenues coming into the Department of Revenue. They look at our expenditures, and they do the best they can to match up what's happening right now, what do we have in the bank, so to speak, and what do we owe. And then they also look at what's the future looking like. And that's why our forecast went up about $1 billion from November to February, as they saw increasing economic activity. So it's really critical that they obviously have to do their homework, come up with their best guess, and they make a projection. And so in February, they made a projection that we had a little over $1.8 billion of forecast balance. But of that $1.8 billion, about $450 million of that is in the current biennium. And that's money we say is really kind of in the bank. It's not quite here, but it's darn close. But the rest of it, the $1.4 billion, that's based on projections for July 1 through the next 2 years. And that is what we call a forecast balance, because it's not really a surplus, because it's not in the bank yet. So
and some of it extends into the next biennium.
Right. In fact, we have over $3 billion surplus anticipated for the 2018-2019 biennium. So we've got a balance. We have an actual balance of over $400 million. This biennium ends on June 30th. $1.8 billion balance for the next biennium, and over $3 billion balance for the biennium after that. So this is the best shape we've been in a long time.
So, but let's talk a little bit about the accuracy of that forecast. Do you have some statistics? I'm not asking for maybe level of detail here, granular level, but do you have some sense for how close those forecasts have been over multiple administrations in many years?
They do study that, and it's really interesting because the range of change is really is fairly static, and it doesn't change a whole lot. I don't have the number in front of me, or I can't remember it, but they are very accurate. And what happens is so often is it's the analysis of what's in the bank is always fairly accurate, obviously, and it's always the variability comes in the projection of what's going to happen over the next year. We've had occasions where the February forecast may say there's a balance of $1 billion, and when the recession hit, that $1 billion wasn't showing up in November even. So things can happen fairly dramatically, and those can really affect your accuracy. So the economy can really affect the accuracy quite a bit.
Some of our viewers may remember the farm crisis, the ag crisis, and sort of the general economic malaise, but in this state in particular, the economic difficulties that were present in the beginning in the early 1980 and the early 1980s, and the then governor of Minnesota, Al Quie, had 6 or 7 special sessions because the the projections, the money did not come in, and budget cutting became a necessary tool to deal with some of those issues, as well as tax increases.
Budget cut is so difficult. I mean, when I started in 2011 at the Department of Revenue, we had the $6 billion projected deficit. It is so hard to manage government and to manage budgets for the biennium with those kind of deficits looking at you, obviously. I mean, you're making really drastic, you have to make drastic changes in either your revenue and or your expenditures or your spending to make that balance come out. And that's a hard way to run government.
Now, the Star Tribune this morning, I believe, if I'm recalling this correctly, perhaps it was yesterday, but they had an article about the fund that collects abandoned property. Now, does that operate under your department?
No, it does not, but it's an important fund because it's amazing how much abandoned property there is in this country.
The article
in this
reports
state.
several $100 million.
It's a lot of money, and it's something that it's under the Commerce Department, and they try to locate people, and they try to do a lot of commercial outreach for people, but a lot of folks simply lose track of something. They may have moved, and maybe the check didn't get forwarded to them, and they forget that they had a refund coming. There's hundreds of millions of dollars just sitting there, unclaimed property.
The suggestion in the article was that perhaps more aggressive efforts are necessary, but since it's not your principal responsibility, we won't cross-examine you about that. We'll leave that for some future guest.
All right.
So let's talk a little bit about where you see MMB. I mean, we don't know how long you'll serve. We don't know what the future holds in that regard. But as you look down the road, what changes do you see in the way in which MMB operates? And if you can share with us, are there some specific recommendations you would make for future governors of either party who might look to MMB for professional advice?
I think one of the two areas I really think are critical, and that's the budget area and the bonding area. In the budget area, it's really difficult to put together budget preparation for any governor, I think, with this large of a government operation. And, $40-some billion every 2 years. And you have to track down all the programs and all the different nuances. There are so many special funds, dedicated funds for different activities that you have to track as well. So one of the recommendations that I'll be making to the governor, and one of the things he would like to see is a more simple, in a way, budget system that can present the different agencies, the different programs in a way that not only the executive, but that the legislative branch can get a better handle on, and that the public can understand as well. I have to tell you that it's difficult to understand some of our budget preparations because there's so much interplay with special funds, federal funds, and so we've got to try to make that more transparent and more understandable. That's going to be a challenge. And the other thing I think that really we need to work on in the future is bonding. Bonding is such an important part of the state. In the past, we used to always have this year, the odd-numbered year. The first year of the biennium was always a budget year. And in fact, we have to put together a budget. We have to come to agreement on a budget by the end of this session or by June 30th so that the government can continue to operate in the next biennium. And typically, the bonding bill has been done in the even-numbered years, in the short session. But Governor Dayton and some other governors in the last decade have sort of sped that process up a little bit, and there are bonding bills in many years in both years. And part of the difficulty is in evaluating and prioritizing those bonding projects. As you can imagine, across the state, there are a lot of needs. So you have the MnSCU system with all of its buildings, the University of Minnesota. You have the agencies, the Department of Corrections. You have local bonding projects. You have, of course, the trunk highway system is another bonding source. So you have a lot of different needs that need to get prioritized in a way that makes the most sense. But as you know, the bonding bill requires a supermajority.
60%.
So it makes it even more difficult. So you have to make sure, and rightfully so, it should be a mix around the state. I mean, everyone understands that, and they want that to be true. But I think that's another area where we can try to provide some more guidance and some more transparency as to the bonding process so that the public and people around the state can get a better sense of why are we doing a project in Mankato or St. Cloud or in Halleck, Minnesota.
Do you have a sense, to some extent this is an accounting question, it may not be entirely fair, but I'll ask it anyway, and that is, do you have a sense for what our current level of total bonded indebtedness is, where it ranks relative to other states? We've heard legislators on this program over the course of my quarter century here talk about a 3% rule, but it's, I guess, not really a rule. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that process of determining how much we can safely bond for. Obviously, there's a legislative prerogative there in terms of making that decision. I'm not asking you to weigh in on that, but how that all works with respect to maintaining the fiscal integrity that's important to the state.
No, that's critical because, once again, I'm going to go back to the rating agencies. Again, a lot of what we do at MMB is to make sure that the rating agencies that take a look at our state see a sound, budget process and forecasting process and bonding process. They want to make sure that we're living within our means. They don't care so much about what it is that we bond as long as it's legal. They just want to make sure that in this case the 3% rule does sort of work. We try to come underneath the cap of 3% of our revenues for indebtedness, but the problem is, let's say we pass an $850 million bonding bill this year, which the governor is going to propose next Tuesday, by the way.
We make news here. People need to pay attention.
There will be a press conference next Tuesday with the governor on the bonding bill, and it'll be around $850 million. Now, we won't bond for all that right away because only some of the projects will get up and running. We will have a new bond issuance later this year in the summer, probably.
And, of course, that's his proposal. The legislature has to approve it, so forth.
I'm sure they'll approve it, intact, right? Got to be optimistic going into this, right? So we'll bond some of that, but not all of it. And the same thing happened last year. There was a bonding bill, and not all of that has been bonded for. So you have to manage what is actually bonded and how much debt is actually out there. And that's what the rating agencies look at this rule. If you increase your debt limit so much that you'd have a hard time making the debt payments. For example, the amount of money we think you need to pay on debt for the $850 million is around $60 million a year once it's all fully been released in bonds. So you can see that ratio. You want to make sure that you have enough cash or revenue to pay for the indebtedness that you have. And I think that, most bonding rating agencies like to see states invest in their infrastructure and make sure things work, that your roads work, but they also want to make sure you do it within your means. That's why these 3% rules, it's not really a rule, it's really kind of a guideline that rating agencies review the state with.
One of the issues, of course, that affects this, and you hear budget wonks, we're getting deep in the weeds here, and then I'll back our way out. But one of the
once we get in the weeds, I might want to stay there.
No, that's right. That's right. But one of the things you hear budget wonks talk about, of course, are interest rates. If interest rates go up, your cost of borrowing money goes up. And, of course, the Federal Reserve's talked about maybe increasing some interest rates. This is also a factor that you're looking at, I assume, right?
Absolutely. In fact, this is still a good time to borrow. I mean, the rates are low, and they've been low for a long time. And we know at some point they're going to go back up, or at least we hope they go back up, because eventually if they go back up, that means the economy is doing better and the Fed feels confident about the economy. But right now, the costs for borrowing are really pretty good for a state. And so the governor really believes that it's an appropriate time to invest in the state. And the other thing, it's both because the interest rates are fairly low now, cost of borrowing is down, but also he believes that we've sort of neglected the infrastructure. And there's billions of dollars worth of projects out there. And our challenge is selecting those that really are the top priority, have a statewide impact, and can really help the state. Like civic centers in Mankato or Rochester or St. Cloud are ways that we've invested bonding projects, but road projects as well. So do they have a state application to them?
Do you, in terms of our bonded indebtedness across the 50 states, some states, of course, have some significant debt issues. Is Minnesota in that category or not?
No, we've really managed our debt, I think, for many, many years. We've been fairly a conservative state. Now, we've increased the amount that we've done bonding in the last 10 or 20 years, but we've always done so with the idea of keeping within the guidelines because we want, Minnesota runs a very conservative fiscal house, and the rating agencies appreciate that.
So we've got a question from a viewer who wants us to talk about money for roads and bridges. This viewer is from Big Lake, wants to know, it notes that in the past, money for roads and bridges was separate from general fund money. This viewer doesn't think we should be sending refunds back, keep the general fund intact. and he thinks we should keep transportation funding separate. Can you explain to our viewer, and not only that viewer, but our viewers across Minnesota, how the transportation funds work in terms of whether they're separate or not separate, and how that whole process unfolds?
Yeah, the transportation funds are separate by Constitution, and so what the Constitution requires is that these funds that come in for on the trunk highway funds for the transportation have to be separately accounted for and spent only on trunk highway funds. And so one of the things that this has done, and I think I agree with the premise of the questioner here, is that we have been able to establish a fairly steady stream for supporting our bridges and roads and transit system through this dedicated fund process. And some states don't do it. I mean, some states, money is money, and it all goes into the general fund, and you dole it out the way you want to. But this has been fairly successful for Minnesota by segregating these funds. Now, that's why going forward, the governor does not want to take general fund money and put general fund money into roads and bridges. He wants to increase the gas tax, for example, so we have more dedicated funds that we can use for roads and bridges. And there is one of the really interesting dilemmas that we're facing right now is the price of gas that has come down so dramatically. And that's one of the reasons we have in Minnesota a forecast balance, because overall this is a net positive for Minnesota. It's not a net positive for North Dakota, for example.
Right. Or Texas.
Or Texas. So if you're an oil producing state, this is a tougher situation for you. But for a non-oil producing state, it's an overall economic benefit. But it reduces the amount of money that goes into the trunk highway fund because gas is lower and it's cheaper and there's less tax paid. And in addition, we have cars becoming more efficient, getting more miles per gallon. You have the alternative fuels. So we're seeing less money going into the trunk highway fund, even as we see that the costs and maintenance and improving those go up. So that's one of the reasons why everyone is talking about what is the need. You know, Commissioner Zelli has been traveling around the state trying to figure out what is the need in transportation, and the governor and he have put together a proposal where they say it's about $7 billion need in terms of mass transit, roads and bridges, and that's what we're trying to solve for. And their proposal is to solve for it outside of the general fund with dedicated revenues.
Now, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I have this understanding that we have historically used some general fund revenues for transportation issues. Am I right about that?
Some, but not a lot. I mean, when you look at the budget for the Department of Transportation is actually kind of small given how big of an agency it is, because so much of that agency relates to trunk highway funds and those dedicated funds. So the general fund budget of transportation is quite small. We use it, for example, there's a TED program for, what's it called? It's for development of local transportation projects. For example, you may have a business area that they want to put a mall in, or maybe some other businesses, but that particular exchange or road system there is a problem, and it doesn't serve the volume very well. And if you fix that road, you could kind of enhance the economic activity of that particular area. And so these TED monies we use specifically to help economic development for transportation, those are out of the general fund. So we do pick and choose some areas, but by and large, not very, very big dollars.
So a viewer from Maple Lake found our discussion about forecasting interesting and wants to know whether either the recent Target layoffs, which I think may have wound up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 employees, or Taconite mine layoffs, were those forecast in the budget surplus, or do they now negatively affect the surplus going forward?
They were not probably. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that they were not in the forecast.
Forecasters they don't have a crystal ball. So,
and that's why that two-step process for the forecast. What do we have now, and then that really difficult step, what's going to happen in the future? That's why that's so hard. But remember, one of the things that happened. People said the week that the forecast came out in late February, early March, oil prices have started to go back up fairly dramatically. Mm-hmm. And everyone was saying, well, your forecast shows the price of gasoline going down, and it's starting to go back up again. I said, yeah, but it goes up and down. Well, about a week after the forecast, it went back down again. So these are the kinds of things that happen. You know, economy and shifts occur, the different transactions happen, and that's why these forecasters try to pick a range of how much positive is it going to be or how much negative. And so they try to have those factored in, but they did not specifically have that factored in. So that's some of the negatives. Now, maybe in a month or two from now, we'll see some positive that outweigh that. That's the challenge of a
And of course,
forecast.
you've always got the ag economy, which viewers in the cities may not be aware of, but it remains a very important part of Minnesota's economy. And you have problems right now with drought, with whether you call it drought or insufficient water supply. Those problems persist. That'll affect your numbers.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, did you see California where they found the smallest amount of snowpack at this time of year in recorded history?
Mm-hmm.
So those folks are obviously facing really difficult choices with the drought. But you're exactly right. And so one of the things that's going to happen with the ag economy, and that's what's so great about Minnesota. You've got a pretty good manufacturing base that's being developed. You've got the ag, you've got tourism, you've got forestry, you've got mining, you've got the high tech, you've got the financial services. That's one of the reasons why Minnesota was able to outperform the rest of the country after the recession hit. And we recovered faster than most other states because we have such a diverse economy and we have a trained and smart workforce that people could hire from. But that's also the challenge going forward. Without our population growing dramatically, in fact, folks like me who are going to start retiring, there's going to be a real need and there's going to be a shortage of people in Minnesota if we're not careful going forward because of the age, the baby boomers are retiring and there aren't enough young people to take their places. And that's why the governor is so committed to investing in education, because when you think about it, every young person we have in this state, we need them to succeed. Because if they succeed, they become educated and trained and ready to perform a job. They will take these new jobs that are going to occur in the next 10 or 20 years.
So a viewer from Yellow Medicine County wants me to push back on you a little bit here. How can politicians make hay out of money that's not in the bank? How can they figure a large projected surplus when it's not in the bank? Private citizens don't get to run their finances based on projections into the future. So your response?
Well, there's unfortunately not much any other way to do it. So we have to, by June 30th, we have to pick a number about what are we going to have to live on the next 2 years. And we know that we're going to have something. I mean, it comes in every month, and the revenue and the tax stream is there, and the economy is there, and the activity is there. So it's pretty certain, unless a major catastrophe, that we're going to have this revenue. So the projection of the revenue is really based upon, what's been happening and what's likely to happen. But, the viewer's right, it is a projection. But just like the same thing, I could go to work tomorrow, and the governor could say, you know what, I don't think you should work here anymore. And my family would be all of a sudden subject to not having that revenue. So I'm making assumptions based on our spending patterns that I'm going to have a job for a few more years. So if the governor's listening, I hope he keeps me on for a while. But we all have that ambiguity to live with, I think.
The other thing to keep in mind here is that these projected budget surpluses are significant dollars, but it's figured on a base over a 2-year budget cycle of more than $40 billion. So we're talking 5%, some 5 to 10% really at the outside. So
Minnesota has a big economy. I mean, that's one of the things that I learned from Dr. Tom Stinson, the economist that took over, that was there before our current Dr. Laura Cullen-Bakitis. And he was telling me a number of years ago, he says, remember, when we're talking about different tax proposals at the Revenue Department, this economy is big, and what you're proposing really is not going to affect it all that much because there's just billions of dollars working through this economy. You want to get as accurate as you can, but you're right, it is a big budget.
Viewer from Bemidji wants to talk about competing states. How much does or should Minnesota consider what the states around us are doing with regard to budgeting and taxes? Do businesses and individuals make decisions based on tax rates? Controversial topic. Peter Nelson at the Center for the American Experiment has done some interesting work here. He would say there's some evidence that they do. What do you think?
Well, let me talk first as a former business person. And, one of the things I learned both in private practice of law and in running a business is that you look at taxes. You look at that is a factor you consider. But I would submit that, as a business person, you look first of all at your employees. It really is, it's your employees that manufacture or provide the service that you're selling. And they're the ones you want to make sure that they're paid sufficiently. You want to make sure that they're trained and educated and they have health care. You want to make sure that you're in a state that's got a transportation system. You can get your product or your service delivered. So there are so many things that go into where you conduct business. And, Minnesota has been the 5th fastest growing economy in the last few years. So one of the things as a business person, you want to be in an economy that's growing and that's expanding. And even if the tax is a little bit higher, it's better than being a state with a flat growth projection, because you want to be where business is growing. So no one can deny that, smart business people look at taxes, they look at health care, they look at employee wages, they look at everything. And I think that's one of the things I learned in running a business. It's a very tough job running a business. You have to consider all those things. But you do look at states around you, and then one of the things that's so interesting when you compare Minnesota to Wisconsin, for example, right now, you see the dramatic growth that we're having, and the fact that our budget is balanced and we have a surplus projected or forecast balance projected, whereas Wisconsin's got a couple $2 billion deficit, I think, at this point, and they're having to cut potentially in higher education. So I think, choices do matter, and, we believe that we've made the right choices to grow our revenue stream enough to support the education and infrastructure. But I really believe that businesses, in the end, look at the quality of a state and what does that state have to offer, and do the benefits outweigh the taxes or whatever else there might be.
One of the issues that, of course, has been sort of percolating, particularly in the ag community, because, of course, you can't move farmland, it is where it is this question of the Minnesota state tax. And I'm wondering, do you get involved in making projections on that, or obviously there's a policy question there about what to do about it, and that decision is made by the legislature or proposals by the governor. But I'm wondering what your data, if anything, shows on that.
Well, that really, the Department of Revenue really makes those projections. But one thing that we talked a little bit about this in 2013. We did make some changes, and we did increase the exemption from $1 million to $2 million, because most states were getting closer to the $2 million, and there are some who have gone all the way to the $5 million plus to
which
match
is federal conformity, right?
And so anyway, we haven't done that yet. It is, it costs millions of dollars to get to that next level. I will have to say, there is a concern about that. I mean, there are a number of folks. Now in the ag world, there's a farm and a small business exception that can help for some small farms or a lot of farms. But there is a concern by a number of people about the estate tax. They'd like to see it conform to the federal. The problem is, from a policy standpoint or a practical standpoint, there are not that many estates that are affected by this. So it's a fair relative. It's under 1,000 estates that are affected, and they may or may not have this problem. So I mean, it's an ongoing issue. People are concerned about it, but on the other hand, it's an expensive thing to make a change on.
Not going to happen in the. It's not one of those snap decisions going to be made. There's going to be a fair amount of analytical work done.
There is a lot of analytical, and I think that clearly. I know that in the tax committee on the House side, Chair Davids has made some concern. He's interested in doing something about this. So it's going to be discussed, I think, as we go forward the next several months.
We have a viewer from Bemidji who wants to know whether or not you're going to do the road tour plan like you did as Revenue Commissioner. So apparently you were entertaining as heck on the road. Are you coming back?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I will say that was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had, traveling around the state for almost a year, going all over the state. And made it all the way to Halleck and northern western Minnesota, and all the way down to Winona and parts in between. But it was a lot of fun. Had a lot of town hall meetings, a lot of opportunities with people. And the neat thing about it was, citizens would come out, and I thought, why would they want to come out on a beautiful summer night and listen to the Revenue Commissioner talk about taxes? But they did, and you know what? They were very interested in hearing. What are the facts? What are the trends? I told them a lot about the trends, where revenues are increasing or decreasing, and sales taxes. They wanted to know that, but they also wanted to let me know their concerns. And one of the funny things was, they were primarily concerned about the value they got for their tax dollars, as opposed to how much they actually paid. They wanted to make sure that government was returning its tax dollars in good services, whether it's roads or bridges or firemen or policemen, and so Minnesotans really want value. So I am going to come up with, I think I'm going to do a bonding tour maybe. So after we get our bonding bill out, I'll drive around the state and talk to people about good bonding projects. But I have to find a reason to get out because it's so much fun.
What issues do you see in the MMB area in the next year or two? Are there things that that you're watching in particular that you think are of concern from a budgeting standpoint or from the standpoint of bonding? Are there issues that you'd be looking at there?
I think one of the big issues is the transportation issue, the question we had a little bit earlier. Depending upon what's done this session, we do face, I think everyone agrees, we face some real challenges in fixing the roads up and fixing the bridges and also the local transit system. And that particular proposal is to add a half-cent sales tax to the 7-county metro area to help fund the transit system in the greater metro area. Those issues, depending on how we resolve them in this session, are going to continue to be on the forefront of what we need to think about is making sure that we solve the transportation transit issue, because I think people who are looking to move to different states and young people, they want to see a state or a metropolitan area that's kind of on the leading edge of transit and transportation. So I think it's important for delivery of products, for business, but I also think it's important for attracting young people and being on the cutting edge of where people want to be.
Talk about the relationship that MMB has with counties and cities. I mean, it's not just the state that you're working with, as I understand it. Can you talk a little bit about how those interactions occur?
One of the things that we actually want to do more of is to have more interaction with cities and counties, because they do a lot. There's a lot of work in terms of trying to make sure that we understand their local needs and how they, particularly, especially in the bonding area, we do a lot of work in looking at their bonding projects, but we do also a lot of work in looking at their needs for local government aid or any other kinds of assistance. And I think one of the things that we could do more of is more coordinated effort to make sure that if the state's going to do something in a county, that county is involved with that. I think the governor's proposal, for example, on the child protection services, he's put in his budget over $50 million to respond to the task force that was put together to come up with better ways to handle child protection around the state to protect children. Well, that's an area where we will work very closely with the counties, the Department of Human Services, but we need to have a better understanding of the needs of the counties and the cities with respect to law enforcement, child protection. There's just a lot of interaction that we think could be improved. And so the communication we want to work on to make sure we understand their needs a little bit better.
A viewer from Windham wants us to go back to gas taxes, and this viewer is concerned about whether or not the tax is collected on a per gallon basis or on a price basis. I think he's referring to the wholesale proposal that the governor's made. A lot of concern about that because, of course, like the value-added tax that you see in continental Europe, that cost is hidden to the viewer, hidden to the user in a way in which the price at the pump is not. Now, do you get involved in making projections as to what those various taxes might raise, and any observations about that process or those options?
Well, the Department of Transportation and the Department of Revenue work together to try to make those projections. But let me explain a little bit about the difference in the wholesale tax and the per gas tax. So right now, you go to the pump and you pay whatever it is, $2.90 or $3.10. But in that calculation is the federal tax and the state tax. The state tax is right about 28.5 cents now, I believe. So if you add, let's say you wanted to add 10 cents to the price a gallon, so if you had $3.10, it'd be $3.20. It'd be on that per gallon tax. And so the problem is when the price of gas goes down, you're going to collect less money. The wholesale tax is designed to be applied at the wholesale level so that the overall price of gas goes up, the amount that's collected goes up. But it's still levied at the pump. So I think the governor's proposal is about a 6.5% wholesale tax, which translates into about a 10-cent per gallon tax. So that would still be added on at the end. So you'd still pay.
So you'd still see that when you see it, right?
You see it. It's just calculated in a different way. So it's really the wholesale gas tax is designed. If gas goes up, the cost of maintaining the roads go up as well. And so it's meant to sort of try to track the cost of maintaining the roads along with the price of gasoline. And so that's one of the differences. But I think Because in 2008, we had the gas tax that was added, and that was the last time it was added. It's not adjusted for inflation, so that it barely keeps up with the cost of inflation and also with the cost of fixing the roads.
How many employees does MMB have?
Just a little under 300 employees.
And has that number been stable over the years?
Very stable, although remember a few years ago, the Department of Employee Relations, DEWR as it was called, was merged into the Department of Finance. And so when that occurred, I think it was 2008, 2007, 2008, so it's been fairly steady since then, about 300 employees.
So we have a question from a viewer in Bemidji who wants you to talk about how do you encourage people to become public servants at the local, state, and federal level. You were in the private sector before your appointment. What advice do you give to a young person thinking about a career in public service?
I love that question. It's something actually I think about quite a bit because we want to attract more young folks to come into public sector. And I don't think a lot of young people think about it that way. We are trying to come up with a way to sort of show what careers, what opportunities are available for people. So we do a lot more on-campus interviews, and we do kind of job fairs to try to let people know about it. But we need to expand that even more. And I think one of the things, especially for the younger folks, there's this tendency that people write about that the millennials, as they're called, like to move from job to job to job. Well, in state government, you can move from one job to another job within the same agency or from one agency to another. So there's that flexibility inside of state government for young people to come in, do something for a few years or whatever, and then change to something else inside of state government. But you can get a lot of responsibility early on in state government that you don't always get in the private sector. And I think that's one of the other things that's really appealing and that I want to try to get more out about.
What kind of background are you looking for in terms of employees? What kind of people work for MMB?
Well, at MMB, we really like people who have a financial or auditing background or who have experience in analyzing data. We have a lot of people who work in the healthcare industry too, and they track. So if you have healthcare experience, that's very helpful because we manage and run a lot of the insurance program as well.
On that note, we're going to be done. I want to thank our viewers for joining us this evening, and I want to invite you to be back next week when we'll have our legislators back with us. Thank you, Commissioner Franz. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
There's much more about Your Legislators online at pioneer.org/yourlegislators. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all of our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join us in the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Major funding for Your Legislators is provided by Move Minnesota, a statewide coalition fighting for a 10-year commitment to fixing our dire transportation needs. A safe, reliable transportation system strengthens Minnesota's economy. Join the conversation at movemn.org. Additional funding provided by Flaherty and Hood has provided quality legal and legislative services to clients in Greater Minnesota for more than 20 years. Our legal team focuses on municipal employment and environmental law, while our lobbyists energetically represent clients at the state capitol. Online at flaherty-hood.com. MAPE members, making Minnesota Clean Water's safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans.